Salam world, I'm your shorter than average girl from down under, and finally we are looking at the final book of Del Toro Quest Series 1, The Return to Del. Oh boy, this book introduced me to plot twists basically, making me crave that adrenaline after a reveal for basically my entire teenage years, and particularly The Return to Del. I mean, I gotta admit, it's not Emily Rodda's best conclusion to a series, but it's definitely the iconic conclusion which set the bar high for all the rest. And the anime took a completely different direction. So, granted, they were the same plot twists, but they were completely different reveals. So, it was like getting that hit all over again. But of course, that is not why we are here. We want to find out what the finale actually means and the hidden symbolism behind the land of Deltora and its tribes. So far, at least. But if you're only here for the book review, then you can skip to the time shown on the screen right now or the timestamp in the description, whichever suits you best. And now that I've actually finished the anime dub, there will also be a full review for that over in this timestamp. So let's talk stories. We start all the way in the Valley of the Lost. The spell has been undone, the Torrents and Fardeep are free once more. But to make sure that the Shadow Lord doesn't know that they're free, the Torrents use their magic to basically protect the valley. And that's when they detect the presence of two strangers, Doom and Dane. Having put the pieces together, Doom decides to come to the valley to see for himself. And after the wise consult of Xeon, the trio decide to reveal the belt to everyone in the valley. Doom asks them how many of the gems the Shadow Lord knows they have, and they say that they hope it's only 4. But hope wasn't an answer for Doom, so the trio decide that they're going to make a plan to find more answers. They're going to use the remaining of the spring water to spy on Fellow. And luckily, the Shadow Lord doesn't know about them having restored the belt, or where they could be at the moment. But he does know Leaf and Barda by name, and that Leaf is the son of Jared and Anna, and Barda isn't Endon, but actually a palace guard. The only person that knows about Barda's history was Jinx, and he told everyone in the Resistance stronghold in the Maze of the Beast. So now the trio know that there is a traitor in the Resistance. And now they had 2 Resistance members that know their secret. That's when the trio decide that they're going to ignore Xeon's advice and go and search for Endon's heir all on their own. And as they're sneaking out of the valley...
Oh, that's just great. That's enough, Nevitz. Back off!
Oops. So much for soloing this thing. But luckily no one asks questions. Instead, the trio were met with Xeon, Peel, Fardeep, Dane, and Doom doing their own brainstorming through the night, and they kind of wanted to share what they came up with the trio. So Dane believed that it wasn't enough just to get all the gems on the belt, but that the spell the belt forms also requires the unity of the 7 tribes. How Dane believed this? Well, because he, like Leaf, was made to study the belt of Deltora as a kid, and his mother was a Tauran woman named Rhaenys. At least that's how I pronounce it. And so they had sat down and figured out what the original 7 tribes were. 'Cause yeah, unlike the anime, the trio didn't know what the original tribes were. It was so long since Del Toro was split up like that. So now everyone's kind of just mixed together, intermarried, and then you have some tribes which were completely annihilated, like the Jealous, and others that had migrated to Del Toro after Arden, like the people of Dor. So now that they actually know who the 7 tribes are, they need a person from each one to renew the allegiance to Arden's heir. They have many Taurens all around them, and Leif and Barda were from Del. Fardeep was of the Mare tribe, and then they just needed to send messages to Dread Mountain and Raladin to get a Dread Gnome and Ralad to show up. And this is where the resistance comes in. Well, specifically Doom. He uses his Blackbird network to send that golden arrow that Boglan had given Leif back to Dread Mountain as a sign that they need a representative. And then he asks Stephen to use the bees to write a message to Reladon. He also brings them someone from the Plains people and the Jalis, two people the trio were not so pleased about. Good old Stephen and Nevitz and Gluck. But Doom's not done yet. He suggests that they meet in a resistance stronghold in Withik Mire, because it was on the way between Del and Tora, which he thinks is where the royal family would be if they were still alive, given that they were traveling from Del to Tora but were then rejected by the Taurens. So this might be connecting the dots. And Withik Mire just happens to be the place where Glock was stationed anyway. Also, Doom suggests that they send decoys off the trio to throw off the Shadow Lord and make it appear as though they were going west to retrieve the last 3 gems. So Peel volunteers to be Barda, Chris chops off his Tauren hair to play Leaf, because yes, unlike the anime, Leaf actually has dark hair, and Lauren frizzes up hers so that she can play Jasmine. Not to mention, she takes a blackbird with her. The next day, the trio are on the back of Stephen's cart, headed for Withik Mire. But Stephen's cart was stopped for inspection by grey guards. Luckily, Stephen had warned the trio of this beforehand and told them that there was a gripper field on one side and the cliff face on the other. It would have been good advice if our trio knew what grippers were. So basically, these are carnivorous succulents, and so the trio fall right into them. Leaf finds that there is a hidden path within the gripper field which leads to a hut, and so after freeing himself and then freeing Jasmine, they haul the badly bleeding Barda into the hut. When they're inside the hut, Leaf, Stephen, and Jasmine find 3 skeletons. One of a woman, one of a man, and one of a baby. And attached to one of these skeletons was a note signed with Endon's seal. Now believing that the heir of the throne was long dead, the 3 decide that they need to get to Withik Mire to tell everyone of this grave news and also get Barda some help. Because, like, by this point, his arms and legs were raw and they were bleeding, and because the grippers have venom, which is an anticoagulant, they couldn't stop the bleeding. So he was in way worse shape than the anime showed. They finally make it to Del's dump of Withik Mire, and there they meet up with the rest of the resistance. Glock makes some medicine for the trio, but tells them to use it on themselves rather than to give it to Barda because he thinks that, unfortunately, Barda's too far gone, hoping at least to save their lives from their injuries. They also show everyone Endon's note, and so everyone falls into despair. But that's when Barda gets up. And when he sees the note, he tells them that it's fake. How does he know this? Well, it's because Endon's note was signed with the royal seal. Endon never took with him the day he ran away. Instead, it was a seal used by the advisors, Fallow. So there is still hope yet, and the ceremony is to continue. Dane was so happy with this news that he personally decided to take charge of healing Barda, dressing his wounds and feeding him. Lucky for Dane, Leaf never looked at his amethyst while he was around them, because if he had, he would have noticed it was pale. So unfortunately, Barda wasn't getting any better. So they decided to do the ceremony next to Barda's bed so that he could be there with them. And when they do, the belt goes hot, meaning that the heir to the throne was in the room. And Leaf thinks that it is Dane. The logic is, and his mother's names are anagrams of Arden and Sharn. He knows the king's sport of archery, he has memorized the Belt of Deltora, and is half Tauren. Bulletproof logic, I swear. And just as they're about to put the belt on Dane, Ichabod crashes the party, takes Dane to Dell, making sure that someone hears the location where he's taking Dane. And just like that, Dane was gone, with the exception of his dagger, which had fallen in the attack, so Leaf picks it up, puts it in his belt, and vows that he will return it to him. Operation Rescue Dane was go. And so the trio again are traveling with Stephen. But then, like halfway through, Stephen stops and he calls Jasmine and Leaf by their Rithmir names. Now, these are names that Barda had given to Stephen because it turns out that Barda, now that Dane is gone, is completely on the mend and that he and Stephen had other plans. But basically, because they knew that there was a traitor among them, they still didn't think that going to the meeting spot would mean they would avoid danger. Instead, Stephen is going to take the trio with the belt inside Dell and then go back to the meeting spot to meet up with the resistance. If everything is fine, he's just going to explain what has happened, and if things aren't fine, well, hopefully that you'll be able to fight them out. At the end of the day, what was most important is the belt would be safe. But when they get to Dell, they find that the streets are empty, until a group of grey gods come with prisoners. Zeon, Fardeep, Glock, Manus, Nanian, and Glathon. Basically, everyone that was meant to be at the meeting spot, except for Doom. And in the middle of a square that they were in was this huge pyramid with Dane tied up at the top. So, of course, the trio and Stephen charge, Leaf going straight towards Dane to try and free him with the dagger. But when he looks, he finds that Dane's dagger is missing. And that is when he hears a huge crash. A huge pit had just opened up in the middle of the square. Barda and Jasmine were like just gripping on to the edges of this pit, but everyone else was gone, including the Grey Gods. And then a whole bunch of rats swarm into the square. And so Leaf knew that this was a trap set up for Nevitz. Because you gotta remember, Stephen and Nevitz are from the Plains tribe. Same place where Norad's is. And so the traitor must have been in their group. Because no one else knew about Stephen and Barda's plan. And then when he looks at Dane, he finds Dane's dagger at his hip. Dane was a grade 3 All. Finally revealed, Dane fights Leaf and knocks the belt into the fire. And as Dane is tooting his own horn, Leaf sees someone coming in the corner of his eye. Doom. But as Doom is coming to strike Dane, he quickly turns into his old form and chokes him out. Leaf desperately rescues the belt from the fire and puts it around Dane's waist, which ultimately kills him. But as he let go of Doom, Doom falls down the entire pyramid and hits his head real hard. So, strangled and concussed now, Leaf decides to take Doom, Barda, and Jasmine home to the forge. As they were tending to Doom's wounds, he is looking around the forge as if he recognizes it. And then he sees Jasmine. His face lights up and his lips start moving. Leaf asks Jasmine to come, thinking that Doom wanted to say something to her. He puts his hand on her cheek and tells her how much she looks like her mother. Of course, this makes Jasmine quite upset. And Doom goes on to say that, yeah, her mother was gone now. Something they have never told Doom about Jasmine. And as though he was talking to someone else completely, Doom says, and I'm gonna read it because it's just too good.
They refuse refuge, dear heart. We must turn back. Go east to Dell instead of west.
And so forth. He mentions the forest and then finally ends it with,
Our child will be safe. Grow strong until it is time.
and there and then, Leaf was convinced that Doom was Endon and Jasmine was the heir to the throne. And if you wanted more proof than that, Jasmine, accepting that Doom is her father, pulls out a rhyme drawn on a piece of paper that her father had given her.
Wake the bear. Do not fear. Scurry, scurry, little mouse, into your small, cozy house. Now you must lift the lid. You'll be glad that you did.
My girlie be hiding secrets for so long. But when Leaf goes to put the belt around Jasmine, well, nothing happens. In dismay, again, Leaf goes into his childhood room, and that's when he hears a crash at the front door. Grey guards. Jasmine made sure to signal to Leaf to stay hidden, whilst the guards take her, Barda, and Doom away. Now, only Leaf, Kree, and the belt were the hope of all of Deltora. Leaf and Kree use Endon's rhyme to enter the palace, where Fellow was gathering all the people of Del for a great execution. On a platform in chains, he sees Xeon, Glock, Fardy, Manus, Nanian, and Glathon. And at Fellow's feet, he sees his parents, all to be branded with the mark of the Shadow Lord, and then. But as Fellow is doing this, he receives news that the 3 traitors have been captured, and so he puts the execution on hold as they're bringing Jasmine, Barda, and Doom up onto the platform. Leaf prepares himself to jump for a desperate rescue, but that's when he looks at the belt and realizes what's wrong with it. He had unscrambled Arden from Dane and Sharon from Rhaenys. Now he's unscrambling Deltora from the first letter of each of the gems. After quickly rearranging the gems in a new order, he formed a plan. He was now going to get the complete belt around Jasmine again. Fellow hadn't noticed because they had just brought the 3 new prisoners up, and as they were unveiling them, he realizes that Leaf isn't there. Leaf's father and Doom lock eyes, recognizing one another in a mix of joy and pain. Taking opportunity of this confusion, Leaf jumps, and as he's just there to get to Jasmine, a lightning bolt strikes the platform and splits it in half. Boom! Chaos. Leaf tries to regain his balance, but then Fallow is on him with his all hand around. Then Leaf's parents grab their chains around Fellow and choke him out. He takes out his knife and stabs Leaf's father, and then they all fall off the platform. Of course, being an all, Fellow gets up straight away while he's holding on to one of the things that are producing the light, basically. And as he does, it accidentally pours this like white acidy stuff on him, and it slowly kills him. And this is when the Shadow Lord decides to show up. And so red clouds are now starting to fill the sky, and Leaf has to act quickly. Jasmine is on the other side of the platform, so he's got to jump, so he sheaths his sword and chucks the belt around him, and bam! A light explodes from the belt, and the red clouds retreat to the Shadowlands. The heir to the throne is restored. Leaf. Leaf goes to his parents, completely confused by what just happened, and Doom, now that he has regained all his memories, explains that 16 years ago, he, Jared, and his wife Anna played as decoys for the real king and queen to throw off the Shadow Lord, while the real Endon and Sharon, Leaf's parents, lived in the forge to raise him for the stay. Same plan that he had when he sent Peel, Chris, and Lauren to the west. Unfortunately, Endon didn't survive Fellow's stab, and so it was left up to the trio, plus Jared, Sharon, and all the friends that they have made, to restore Deltora again. The end. So sorry for that super long summary, but the story in the book is so different from the anime, I kind of had to basically tell it all for all the important details. But yeah, the anime was a lot more intense than the story in the book, and the Dane reveal was so much better. Probably because Dane got a lot more screen time than he does in the book, and he also forms like a deeper connection with the trio. So the betrayal is just so raw. Like, especially Jasmine's reaction, man.
Oh, I forgot. You and I had something special, didn't we, Jasmine?
But I do think that the book's reveal for Jared and Jasmine's relationship, as well as Jared and Endon to some extent, was kind of better. Particularly for Jared and Endon's reveal, I don't remember picking up on it on my first read. Like, I was convinced that Jasmine was the heir to the throne. But rereading it again and again, the signs were there from the beginning. It's absolutely legendary. Jared is a legend, okay? Overall, I really enjoyed the anime. It's definitely one of those shows that gets better as you watch it, with, of course, the exception of the existence of the Karn Squad. But yeah, as the story ramps up, the intensity of the show does too. I think the biggest addition to the enjoyability of the story was the humor added in the anime. It fosters the sense of strong relationship between Leaf Brenda and Jasmine, which isn't exactly there in the book. Like, there's definitely trust, respect, and care between them. There is little to no change in their character due to them traveling together. Whereas in the anime, there's a huge change. At least I think so. Leaf becomes more humble and appreciative, Barda becomes more open to change and others' ideas, and Jasmine becomes more mannered and vulnerable. And speaking of emotions, there is so much chemistry between Leaf and Jasmine in the anime, which I absolutely love. And they even try to put these romantic curveballs in there with Narita, Francoise, and Dane, but like, at the end, we were all rooting for Leaf and Jasmine, so that didn't matter. For all those parents concerned about the hints of romance, they are super, super tame. Honestly, they're cute. There's none of that usual anime shenanigans, like, oh, them falling on each other and getting super awkward about it, or seeing something that they shouldn't have, or even a kiss. Like, the only kiss in there is with Narita. The violence in the anime is super, super tame, and the themes, although they can get dark, are played out tamely as well. So it's a super chill, non-anime anime. And now that the anime review is done and dusted, let's get down to business. Last week, we introduced the idea that each of the gem's guardians represents one of the deadly sins, the 7 traits which are deemed the most corrupting in Christian mythology. And then, back in our shifting sounds analysis, we talked about how the traits of each gem rectifies the weaknesses of the tribe it belongs to, as well as aiding them to prosper in whatever they wish to do. This is also true about the emerald, amethyst, and diamond. We spoke about the problems of the dread gnomes and the taurens in the dread mountain and valley of the lost analysis respectively. So for the proud, self-reliant survival tribe like the gnomes, having a gem which detects danger and betrayal is handy, not to mention all the medicinal properties of the emerald as well. As for a tribe that has removed all sense of negativity in their life through magic, thus forgetting what to look for when it comes to danger, the amethyst provides guidance, leading them to security and changing its appearance in the presence of poison or illness. But the tribe that we haven't discussed are the Jalis, and that's because there aren't many of them in the story. So far, we only know of 4, Gorl and his siblings, and Gluck. The Jalis remind me of Vikings. They are a warrior tribe which live in huts, enjoy oral stories, spit roasts, and drink hard. They don't seem like the friendly type, but if they like you, oh, they like you. But their personalities strike me as being very Saiyan. Again, a warrior race, very proud and honorable, prioritizing strength and dignity over life, even the life of others. They never strike an unarmed person, and they refuse to fight with concealed weapons or trickery. They are cautious of new people, waiting to understand their character before opening up to them. And they demand respect regardless of your social status. So if that wasn't a description of Goku, Bardock, Vegeta, or Broly, then I don't know what is. Again, it makes sense that the diamond, first and foremost, must be gained honorably, or else it curses you. But then it also grants strength and courage, while stopping any mass death from epidemic. And it helps in the cause of true love.
Boy, we sure got some strong-willed women, don't we?
It's rough. Well, some of the time. To be honest, I like her feistiness.
I hear you, Vegeta. That's the same reason I'm with Chi-Chi, too.
We're wired that way, didn't you know? Saiyans only like strong women.
What?
Which may explain Glock's little thing for Jasmine. But that's just the way I imagine them in the books. Obviously, everyone pictures these things differently. Like, for me, the people of Dell were the normal-looking people that went on adventures and stuff. The Rallids reminded me of the house elves from Harry Potter. The Plains people were regal aristocrats, more specifically from an anime I used to watch when I was little called The Rose of Versailles, which I guess the modern comparison to it would be Bridgerton. The Mere people were very boho to me, verging on the Native American aesthetic. You know, with like their long hair with the talismans kind of woven in. And the Dreadnomes were a mix of the goblins and Gringotts and the dwarves from Lord of the Rings, whereas the Taurens were the elves. Me and my quirky brain. But like for the Taurens and the elf thing, that's no coincidence, I swear. If you guys are interested in Arden's story, like I can make a video about that one day, but Arden and Zara's story is word to word Aragorn and Arwen's. Ah! Hopefully that gives you all a little bit of insight from where I'm coming from with the analysis and how I might see things, maybe completely different to how you see things. Because, like, everyone has different images in their head. And for those who have only watched the anime, you definitely have different images in your head. Like, I can say with confidence that the Plains people, Mare tribe, and the Jalas are very, very different in the book versus the anime. So, yeah. The main takeaway from this book is that the Belt of Deltora itself wasn't enough to defeat the Shadow Lord, but the process of its making, aka the unity of the 7 tribes, and the order of the gems is what gives its power. Now, the order of the gems on the belt represent the order of Arden's acquisition of each gem, aka the order which he received the support of any particular tribe, which might surprise you given that the diamond is the first gem on the belt, aka the Jealous gave their gem and allegiance to Arden before any of the other tribes. But again, I won't get too much into Arden's story here. So why these 7 tribes in particular? Lore-wise, that would be spoilers for future books, but we'll be talking about why these tribes are the way that they are, and therefore the necessity of them to be united to defeat evil, at least in my eyes. Just as the 7 guardians represented the 7 deadly sins, the 7 tribes, although flawed, represent these 7 heavenly virtues. These virtues are kindness, charity, humility, diligence, temperance, patience, and chastity. where patience is the opposite of wrath, chastity the opposite of lust, kindness of envy, charity of greed, diligence of sloth, temperance of gluttony, and humility of pride. But the virtue of each tribe isn't the opposite of the sin in their territory. So, for example, the people of Del aren't patient to be the antithesis of Garl's wrath, or the Ralid's chaste to be the antithesis of Tegan's lust. Meaning that the sin, or guardian, preyed on the tribe's weakness, which on normal days would have been eased by the presence of the gem. But now, given that the gem's powers were locked away from their people, those sins were allowed to flourish in the region, leading to the spread of corruption around Altura. Now, this bit is a little bit of an extrapolation because only 4 of the 7 tribes actually have proof of this. But basically, we can see how the sin that was present in each territory was actually part of the weakness of each tribe by being given an example from each tribe of those people displaying that same sin. For the Plains people, the Rakachas demonstrated envy. They wanted respect from the people, but weren't getting it because they were rat catchers, which ultimately turned them to work for the Shadow Lord, who appreciated them more. In the Mirror tribe, Mother Brightly wanted riches, so she too sold off the Rithmir game finalists to the Shadow Arena for more cash. In Dread Mountain, Renan, who feared change in their current lifestyle and their easy access to security, led him to betray his own people and eventually resulted in his demise. And finally, Garl himself is an example of a jawless, corrupted and blinded by anger due to his pride of thinking that he is the most suitable to have immortality. And I think the literary genius of Emily Rodda actually hinted to this mismatch in the Valley of the Lost with the Guardian's riddle. None of the Guardian's pet had the sin that they were named after, making it more difficult to decipher the problem in each pet and so to get the answer that they were looking for. But together, the pets, regardless of what their names were, had the same effect on the Guardian, meaning that with the smallest disorder, humans find it more difficult to isolate problems and overcome each at a time. One needs to first detangle the issue before tackling it head on. And that is why the trio needed to defeat one guardian at a time and gain the trust of the tribe in that region before they eventually face the Shadow Lord. Let's look at the strength of each tribe. What virtue does each represent? Through the examples of characters from each tribe, as well as the tribe's overall characteristics, I believe that the people of Del represent kindness, a genuine concern for the well-being of others and acting generously. And we don't have to look further than Jared, Leaf, Barda, and Jasmine to see that that's true. They have put their lives on the line countless times for the sake of others. But they aren't the only examples of Del that we have. In future books, we'll meet more explorers from Del who set out on quests for the betterment of others. The Rallids, they represent charity. Now, the common use of charity is to give generously to the needy, which the Rallids basically do by building the city of Dor for the immigrants of Dawn. But the origin of the word is the love of God, which extends to love thy neighbor. When we add love into the mix, it seems most fitting for the Rallids, the way that they treat others, and their openness to welcoming and defending strangers, putting in all their efforts into things just for the sake of the goodness in their heart. The Plains people represent humility, which may be surprising at first given that I compared them with regal society, but upon closer examination, the manners of regal society are the most humble, and the evidence that I can give is
No. Me represent the Plains people? I can't. You've got the wrong man for the job. I'm just a traveling salesman with a few tricks up my sleeve. Please don't ask me to do this.
And
Excuse me, but that water is meant only for washing your hands. I'm so sorry.
they were willing to listen, follow, and work for the Rakachas without feeling a hurt in their pride or a sense of injustice by being degraded from their status. Unfortunately, it went down to the extreme of making them ignorant, which ended up being bad for them. But with knowledge, like Stephen's family, they were content in their place in society and don't see themselves as better than anyone else, despite having so much power. The Mare tribe. This one was probably the most difficult to match because we don't have any good confirmed Mirror people in the series. Like, the only good one I can think of is Farty. Basing a lot on what we kind of know about the tribe as a whole and the perception I have of them, I matched them with Diligence. It may be a hard one to believe given their love for gambling, but their superstition combined it with the need for their interaction with others, especially in a business sense, makes them kind but careful, calculated to an extent, but then relying on fate for the rest, making them the combination of carefulness and persistence, aka diligence. For me, the dread gnomes are an example of temperance, self-control, and restraint. They are content with their simple and harsh lives, even though they have the talent, resources, riches, and smarts to upgrade their lifestyle. They choose to survive and thrive. They're level-headed and opt to go with reason rather than emotion. Even when they get emotional, they don't let that run their actions. Overall, they are logic over heart. Like a piece of metal, the living conditions on Dread Mountain has tempered the Dread Gnomes into the strong race that they are. Now, the Taurens, of course, represent patience. I mean, have you seen them? The fact that after being ignored by countless kings and queens of Deltora for decades and centuries, they still decide to write to them. And then when they did eventually break the vow accidentally, they took their punishment on the chin and accepted it. Like, that be patience. It's about accepting your current situation and having hope for the future. And that's literally all Taurens are at this point of the series. Their endurance can only be matched by that of the Rallids under Tegan's curse. And finally, the last virtue, chastity. Now, because in Christianity, lust is very specific, chastity is also very specific. And if we stick to that definition, it doesn't really make much sense, except for the fact that they struggle with love. But as we did with Tegan, we'll be looking at other interpretations of chastity from other ethical schools of thoughts, namely Islam. In Islam, chastity is about preserving the soul and appears as a barrier to anything which could tarnish your view of the world, therefore creating negativity in your soul, or tarnishing people's view of you by focusing on anything but your soul. And the process of maintaining chastity is called hijab. Hijab is a combination of ethical practices and a dress code which aims to shift a person's perspective to be more soul-centric. Now, the headscarf worn by Muslim women is the most infamous part of the hijab and is mistakenly interchanged with the entire concept, when in truth, hijab encompasses the way that both men and women dress and act. Our physical and eye contact, speech, paralinguistic cues, what we hear, what we watch, what we eat, say, and write. It helps ensure that we are not negatively influencing other people's souls, whilst also allowing others to view our souls first and foremost. Applying this to the jealous, we see that they tend to test new people before opening up to them, thus controlling the barriers of entry to their soul. They control how people perceive them through their actions, never judging a person or complying with an individual's status or appearance, using only actions as a measuring stick as the level of influence they're going to allow that person to have on their soul. And we see this in Glock. The Glock in the Rithmeri games is drastically different from the Glock that we see in Withik Meyer, owing to the trust that Doom has gained by him, and then later the trio. In the anime, it was Leaf and Jasmine's actions to save him from the Karn Squad, which prompted him to peel that layer of bravado and show them some tenderness. And in future books, you'll see. Now, given that each tribe doesn't have the virtue to match the sin in their territory, they can't defeat it. The only way that sin can be defeated is by unity, where their strength and skills can be exchanged for the ultimate cause. That is why both Arden and Leaf needed to unite the tribes. It's not the gems at all, but the unity of the heavenly virtues. The gems are only a symbol of the sacrifice and trust of each tribe. Because if you'd recall, the gems help the tribes in their personal goals and patch up their weaknesses. Giving such a talisman up indicates for each tribe that they are foregoing their own personal objectives for a greater cause and making themselves vulnerable in their weaknesses, meaning that they would have to depend on another tribe to assist them. And that is why the Shadow Lord works tirelessly first to break the bonds between the tribes and their trust in the unity before destroying the symbol of that united strength, the belt. So even though the gems are powerful on their own, and the belt is a force to be reckoned with, the ultimate warrior of virtue can only be created when all 7 heavenly virtues are combined together, here represented by the unity of all of Deltora. Then, and only then, can the combination of the 7 deadly sins, the personification of evil, be defeated. This series is such a hype for kids, particularly this final book. Like, even as I reread it for the sake of making this video, I found myself jumping at the good bits. Honestly, I can't recommend this series enough for primary schoolers. It'll definitely start them on the bandwagon of solid literature in the future. Its messages are straightforward, even if they're deep, and that's what I like about it. And that's the first series of Deltora quests. Thank you so much for voting for this. I really enjoyed making this series and I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, please make sure to get into the books if you haven't read them, or watch the anime if you haven't watched it, because they're really worth it. And if you don't know where to look for the English dub, the entire thing is on YouTube, so it's actually really easy to find. I'll be going through Series 2 and Series 3 of Deltora Quest in the future, and if you guys like, I may even consider doing other Emily Rodda series, like the Three Door Trilogy or Rowan of Ren. Let me know in the comments if you want to see those. And also if you want to see Arden's story in full. I hope to catch you next time for the anime sub-watch and for future videos as well. Be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.